That's one of the first things, is to climb the mountains, and it's going to be difficult. You might slip and things can go wrong. And that's part of the package. But then there's also the stories. And I'm one of these stories. I came here when I was 22. That was 38 years ago. And I came here as a broken young man. And I'll explain it. You need to understand why I was broken. I felt called to priesthood since I was 5. So that's a beautiful vocation, priesthood. But at the age of 13, I felt called to the world. So I had 2 vocations, one to God and one to the world. And I was pretty good at keeping them both together. Which meant on Sundays I'd go to Mass and pray to God to make me a priest. And on Monday till Saturday I'd do exactly the opposite. So that was a double life. I was really good at a double life. But after many years of that, at the age of 21, I discovered myself trapped in various addictions, and the hypocrisy becomes very painful. Very painful. And I just found myself faced with the trap that I was in, with no way out. Well, no way out that I could see, because you can't just leave your bad habits because you think, I've had enough. No, they hang on to you. Anyway, at that time, lots of things went wrong. I ran away from New Zealand and I ended up here. A broken man, lots of failures, lots of humiliations. But the word that described me would be shame. This is how I found myself in Medjugorje, riddled with shame. Now, I saw that everyone was going to the confession, so I thought, oh, I better go to confession. But if you're riddled with shame, confession is not an easy thing to go and do, because how can I go and tell my things to a priest? So I was looking for a really old priest who was, I was wishing him his death afterwards, because I didn't want to see his face 2 times. The shame wouldn't allow me to enter into a relationship with anyone. But there were no old priests, just young guys, and so I had to risk going to a young priest. So then I thought, well, what half-truths could I tell and what little lies could I tell? I just wasn't going to spit out everything. And so my first miracle of Medjugorje happened. I came here, I sat in front of a young priest, and I told the truth. That's the miracle. I told the truth. Now, it was so good to tell lies. At that time, I shared my shame. And I came out of that confession with my second miracle, and that was an unbelievable joy and a happiness that I've never had before in my life. And it was so extraordinary to be happy when you've never been happy like that before. Physically, it's painful. My body wasn't geared for happiness. And the remarkable thing of that experience was that I'd given something terrible to God, and he had given something so beautiful back to me. And that's the dynamic. That's the process I've come to experience in Medjugorje. You open up the worst of yourself to God, he will give the best of himself back. If you're honest about who you really are in your depth, God's waiting for you there. Now, I've seen this miracle time and time again. I'll give you one good story. A lady came to me for confession, and she said, Father, I come to confession every month, and these are my sins. And gave me the list. And I said, well, lady, look, you're never going to see my face again. Is there something you'd like to leave here at Medjugorje? And she said, well, yes, there is, Father, but I can't tell you because I've never told anybody. And I said, well, you could try. So there's a little bit of silence. And then her face got strange, like she'd been eating lemons, you know, and when she had to think of what she was going to say. And then she said, well, Father, 33 years ago, and she told me a sin. And I saw her straighten up, started to breathe, and then the tears, and her face became beautiful. I was looking a transfiguration. She was extraordinary. And she'd handed something horrible to God, and God was doing a beautiful miracle in her. It was like God had been waiting 33 years for this moment. And these moments come again and again and again. Now, in the story of the prodigal son that Jesus tells, when is it that the prodigal son remembers the father? When he's eating the pig food. That's when he wakens up and looks inside himself and he discovers, at the house of my father. And the prodigal son, he's the guy who enters into the banquet. The elder son who struggles to do anything wrong, he doesn't appreciate the joy. And he doesn't know who his father is, as he who has gone right to the bottom knows. So I am convinced that one of the works of Our Lady here at Medjugorje is to take her children to the bottom of their shame, of their sin, and of their dark. Because there at the bottom, that's where the power of God. Is that me? That's at the bottom, that is where the power of God is waiting for us. Now Jesus said one time in the Gospels, I will leave you a sign. I will leave you the sign of Jonas. Now Jonas was a great prophet, but Jonas didn't like to pray, and he didn't like to do what God told him to do. And he said, I will give you the sign of Jonas. Just as Jonas was for 3 days in the belly of the whale, so too will the Son of Man be in the belly of the earth. Now, God said to Jonas, go and preach to Nineveh. And so Jonas went to Tarsus, the other way, to run away from God. And as happens, when we try to run away from God, all our problems start to follow us. And when we lose control of everything, we don't know what to do next. The next thing we want to do is just to die. And so he said to the sailors in a big storm, look, throw me overboard and you'll have your life saved. So they do throw him overboard and he says, now I can die. But no, it gets worse. The whale swallows Jonas. There he is in the belly, with all the dead fish and masticated stink. And he's got to stay there for 3 days, and he doesn't know if he's going to come out the back end or the front. That is when Jonas starts to pray for the first time. And it's a prayer of surrender, it's a prayer of thanksgiving, it's a prayer of praise. And that is when the whale throws him up the front. When Jonas goes to speak to Nineveh, everybody's converted. The old, the young, the boys, the girls, the men, women, everybody. And all the animals turn up and they want to be baptized as well. And all of creation starts to respond to the word of Jonas. And you'd ask, well, where did all that power come from? Well, God can give Jonas his true beauty and his true power only after the whale. Before the whale, Jonas was an arrogant idiot. After the whale, he was a humble servant of God. After the whale, God can give you your true beauty. He can reveal to you your true beauty because you've hit the bottom. That's when you are truly in his hands. Now we've got one beautiful example of this is our great Pope, Pope Peter. Now he is a great Pope, a big saint, the first one. And Jesus gave Peter the keys and he said, you are Simon, son of Jonas, upon you, you are Peter, and upon you I will build my church. And Peter means rock. I'm going to build my church upon you who are the rock. And you have the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and the powers of hell will not prevail against you. And then he said, and I'm going to go now to Jerusalem, and I'm going to die for you. And Peter says, well, I've got the keys now, I'm the first pope, and you're not going to do that. And so Jesus turned to Peter and he said, get behind me, Satan. You don't think like God, but you think like men. And Peter says, how can you call the first pope Satan? How can you talk to me like that? I've got the keys, and I'm ready to die for you. So Jesus said to Peter, you're ready to die for me? You wait till you listen to the cock crow. And you know what you're ready to do for me then. Oh, no, I'm going to die for you. Then later on the cock did crow, and Peter had betrayed Jesus in the most shameful, cowardly way. That's our first pope. And that's when Peter went right down to the bottom. Right down, and he saw his shame. He saw who he really was. That is when Peter started to become the great man he is. When he started at the bottom. And if now the church has the power to forgive, and it has the power to forgive, it's because Peter is the greatest forgiven one. The true beauty of Peter comes after the betrayal. The greatness of Peter comes after he saw who he really was. And so it's in God's interest and our own interests to see our dark, to see our sin and own up to it. And let God emerge from within it. Because it's not that God's far away. God is inside of us. And sometimes he's trapped in our sense of control and our need for arrogance and our shame and our accusations of the world and resentments and accusations of ourselves. And it's as though God can't do much. While I want to hang on to my bitterness and shame and secrets. If anyone has anything to do with addiction, there is a great saying amongst us in recovery. Our secrets are our sickness. Keep a secret and you've got a sickness. So, what happens? I lost track of myself.
You're Peter, and then Peter became great in his betrayal. And then
yes, now I remember. Yeah. So what has to happen then? It's in our interests to go down to the dark. It's in God's interests to take us down there, because that's when the most wonderful things start to happen in our life and for our life. That's when we truly can be instruments of God in His hand. It's not doing the great things and finally doing adoration and coming to rosaries and all that, which is wonderful things to do. But we can do all of that for the wrong reasons. We truly become our greatest when we let God into our darkness. That's where God is Himself in all of His power and beauty. And only He can do that, not us. We can't get in the way of it. We can get in the way, but if we don't get in the way, that's when God reveals His greatness in our weakness, in our sinfulness. So how do we do that? Which is why I'm now going to give you a little message here. I'm giving you this little message, which is the message Our Lady gave me when I came here in 1988. Hand those backwards. Hand it back. Give me one. She gave this message to me. Well, she gave it to me. She gave it to the world in 1988. It was the message of the 25th of June. I don't know if Mariana told you that Our Lady leaves a message here every 25th of every month. So in the apparition on the 25th of every month, and there will be one in a few days now. Hey, what's today? 24th. Tomorrow. There'll be another apparition tomorrow, and there'll be a new message. This was one of the monthly messages. And you'll notice that the message you're going to get tomorrow, she will speak. Mary has a word for us. If you haven't got enough, I've got more messages here. And this is the message I received, and I took it personally as though she was speaking to me, and I think she was. And there's a word in here which guides my life, and I think should guide yours. It's a word that Mary uses often in these years. She used it 2 months ago in her last message. And the word is this. It's right in the middle. Surrender yourself to God. That's the word. Surrender yourself to God so that He may heal you, console you, forgive everything inside of you which is a hindrance on the way of love. In this way, God can move your life or form your life, and you will grow in love. And He will grow in you day by day to His fullness. That's the message. Surrender, and God will heal, console, forgive, move, and grow in you. Now that's a lot of stuff for surrender. And if that's true, then we need to learn how to do that and what that is. If this is true, if surrender does allow God that freedom, we better get on board with that and understand it. Now Mary, who invites us to surrender, she is surrender, and she shows us what that is. It's this. Here I am, Lord. Be it done unto me according to your word. Simple as that. It's an attitude of allowing God and wanting God to do his will in us. Now you need a lot of courage to do that, because we're always saying, yes, God, you can do whatever you like, but don't touch my children, and don't do that, and you can't do this. And we're always telling God what he can't do. And so that's not surrender anymore. You've got to let God take over the whole package. That's surrender. And so when Mary said, here I am, Lord, do with me what you want, that's when he started to grow in her day by day to his fullness. To console her, and move her, and form her. To such a point that her whole life started to be the life of God in her, which is what surrender does. God can live your life if you surrender. He lives your life. So your eyes, your words, your touch, your deeds, your activities, your services, it's God doing them with you. So when Mary goes to visit Elizabeth and says to Elizabeth, good morning, Elizabeth gets filled with the Holy Spirit and the baby starts to dance around in her womb. And Mary says, but I only just said good morning. And Elizabeth replies, when I heard your greeting, the baby started to dance in my womb. Your greeting carried the Holy Spirit. That's surrender. And then when the baby's born, Bethlehem becomes the center of the universe. The star comes, and the sheep come, and the camels come, and the angels come, and the shepherds come, and the wise king come. It becomes beautiful. But what happens then too is that King Herod wants to come. And he sends his soldiers there. And they kill all the babies. So that's when we would start to worry about surrender. And we'd say, well, Father, okay, thanks God, you've done a great job here. The camels were a wee bit exaggerated, but we can put up with that. But the soldiers know they should not have come to Bethlehem and want to tell God he's wrong. Which is exactly what Mary doesn't do. She doesn't tell God he's wrong. She gets up, Joseph gets them up, get the baby, and they go. And just let God run the show. Because God knows very well what we don't know, is that the devil will try to kill the life of God in you. And what he knows, which we don't know yet, is that if he lives our life, God lives our life, he will ask us to live his life. And the life of God is a life of being betrayed, persecuted, and killed. He says, where I go, you will come too. If you want to follow me, you've got to take my cross, your cross, and come and follow me, and be where I am. And so when Jesus surrenders to the Father, he says, Father, take this chalice away from me. But don't do my will, may your will be done. That's surrender. Simple as. Don't think surrender's some strange novena. It's a simple attitude in prayer of, you do your will in me. And 3 minutes after that surrender, Judas comes along, gives Jesus a big kiss, and Jesus, what? My friend, you betrayed the Son of Man with a kiss. And he says to the Father, Father, I've just surrendered myself to you. Why is this idiot giving me a kiss right now? Why? Well, the Father wanted Jesus to go right down to the bottom. Right down at the bottom of our shame and of our sin, where we need to go. Because that's where we'll find him. That's when the new life begins. That's where the forgiveness begins. That's where the power begins. Right at the bottom. So the Father, yes, wanted Jesus to go right down at the bottom. Because surrender is always beautiful. It's always terrible. But it's always, always, always surrender. It's always, always, always resurrection. Always. The road of resurrection starts with surrender. And resurrection isn't a missile that flies upward. Resurrection is a journey downwards to the tomb. That's where the resurrection starts. Down at the bottom. And even when you think it's too late, it's not too late. One day Lazarus was dead, and he had been dead for 4 days, and when Jesus turned up, he says, take away the stone. And they said, no, we're going to touch the stone because he stinks now after 4 days. And Jesus says, I told you, if you would believe, you will see the glory of God. So they do take away the stone, and Lazarus comes out, wasn't smelling, and he was alive. That's surrender. Surrender is the road of resurrection. Even though it must take you down to your dark, you're going to see your shame. You need to. You need to own up to who you really are, because that's the beginning of your truth. And Jesus says, you will know the truth. It'll make you miserable for a bit, but it will make you free as well. So that's my little talk. You've got to do surrender. And don't think it's difficult. Oh no, hang on. It is difficult.